All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the March 2018 session of the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. My name is Mark Voda. I've been your host for the last 18 months and chair. We've got a couple of our regular guest presenters, Mike Blumenthal, MVP, and Ralph Rivas from Magenic. We've got a very interesting topic that came out last week from one of the members. The big topic of today's session is all about governing SharePoint. I'm fully expecting to have this be a very passionate and at times conflicting discussion once we get to it. Should be a very interesting recording going forward. Let's jump in. Today's agenda, we're going to still talk about SharePoint, the big picture, look at recent news and upcoming events. Michael Blumenthal has his Office 365 update. Ralph Rivas has his normal slot for the SharePoint framework update as well. We'll then dive into governing SharePoint tips, and as time permits, dive into governing SharePoint tips, tricks, and lessons learned. And as time permits, per usual, bring your own problems at the very end. One thing I want to mention is we are starting to see signs that this meetup group or this SharePoint users group may need to move off of Meetup. Meetup expects there to be a physical presence on a regular basis. And since we went virtual, and by the way, we're up to 309 members, where we started out last year at 150. So we've doubled in size now since we took ownership of this, because of this virtual format, but it's going to mean that we're probably going to be moving onto a LinkedIn platform. Watch email for updates in that particular regard. You may see an email saying, hey guys, we're moving. We're leaving some links behind on Meetup, but we're shifting over to LinkedIn where we don't have any of these restrictions about being a virtual group. I'm looking forward to it, and our team's already hard at work building what I think is a very cool looking interface in that LinkedIn group. Time to talk about big picture stuff that's relevant to today. Remember where SharePoint was meant to fit. There are 4 stages in a collaboration maturity model: communicating, sharing, tasking, and tracking. Governing SharePoint becomes much simpler when you understand these stages, and that was where SharePoint was originally meant to fit. A real genuine truth is, if your organization isn't using SharePoint for collaborating on either projects and or processes, then you're probably missing out on its primary purpose. That doesn't mean you won't get any ROI, but it means that adoption and ROI are always going to be a struggle for your organization. Why? Because you're paying licenses for every single person in the organization. So if only a subset of people are actually leveraging it because of other purposes, like content management, like applications, then it's always going to be a struggle to try to really fully get that ROI that you've been seeking. Looking at news and events, and Mike is going to cover some of these. There's just a couple of pieces of news at the top. You saw the very same bullet points last month. Some new events on the horizon. March 24th, we've got a SharePoint Saturday in Virginia Beach. Those of you that are interested in spring break, that might be a nice way to dovetail both of those in. March 25th and 3rd through the 30th is SharePoint Fest in Washington, D.C. April 18th is our next Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group session. Right after that, in early May, we've got SharePoint Saturday, Chicago Suburbs. This is a very well-attended, very popular event. Almost always the weather turns out great. It's a morning long and goes just a little bit into the early afternoon. A good time is had by all. Looking forward to it. May 21st and 22nd, we shift gears and go all the way to Las Vegas, where we got SharePoint NA going on. Later on in the summertime, and I think there's 1 or 2 other sessions Mike's going to talk about. Then we're looking ahead to the fall, to September, to December, where we've got more events coming up. Handing over to Michael Blumenthal to talk about Office 365 news and events. Mike, I'm changing presenter over to you. And there you go.
Let me just share my screen here.
You sounded a little distant at first, but now you sound fine, and the screen looks great right now.
Good. Let me get these controls out of the way. And drag that out of there. Welcome, everyone. So I'm Michael Blumenthal, and I want to cover a bunch of IT events. Some overlap with what Mark just talked about, but some other ones too. So coming up in just about a week is an event, a new event from Microsoft called the Employee Engagement Summit, and this is actually run out of the Yammer product team. Yeah, so Yammer is still alive and well in Microsoft. Even though Teams has gotten a lot of the press lately, Yammer is still very much a living and ongoing concern. In fact, if you may have noticed from LinkedIn that they got a new general manager about 7 months ago. And so Yammer is very much a healthy thing. So they're doing a new event called the Employee Engagement Summit, it's an online event, but we're doing a viewing party for it, we being my Office 365 adoption user group. And that's March 20th, and we're going to do that at Microsoft Downers Grove. I'll put the link to our user group, which is also on Meetup, in just a slide here. But moving ahead, in April, in addition to some of the other events, other SharePoint events, there's a Advanced Learning Institute event called the Internal Communications for Dispersed Workforce Conference. That's April 10th to 12th here in Chicago. As Mark mentioned, SharePoint Saturday, Chicago Suburbs is back May 5th. SharePoint North America is May 21st to 23rd in Las Vegas. If you can't get to Las Vegas, we are planning a viewing party for the May 21st keynotes, and that will be in Chicago, of course. Whether it's Chicago City or suburbs remains to be seen. We've got to see where we can get a room. Looking ahead to June 9th, there's a Chicago Code Camp. That's a Saturday. The Digital Workplace Conference. Yes, Mark?
NA stands for North America?
Yes.
Okay, yep, thanks.
Yes, definitely not in North America rather than not applicable. The DWX, the Digital Workplace Experience Conference, comes to Chicago June 18th to 20th, and I will be doing a lunch and learn at that event. Looking ahead to Microsoft Ignite, that's in September 24th to 28th in Orlando, and then we can, as Mark said, also expect the SharePoint Saturday Chicago City in the fall, and then SharePoint Fest comes back to Chicago in December, this time not for 4 days, but for 5 days. From a SharePoint perspective, there's a announcement cadence that we've come to expect from last year, which will be true again this year. SharePoint North America, Microsoft is extremely excited about because they will be making major announcements at SharePoint in North America, which is why we felt it was very important to do a viewing event for the May 21st keynote. That will be like the future of SharePoint was. I think it was last year. Microsoft will make major announcements about the SharePoint roadmap for the next 12 months at SharePoint in North America on the 21st. So if you can't get to Vegas, come watch it with us in Chicago.
Cool.
Likewise, so that's the sort of spring announcement event, the spring SharePoint moment. And then in the fall at Ignite, we can expect, again, more announcements, some of it being a recap of, hey, this is what we promised in May, this is what we delivered, and some of it is, this is what we're still working on going forward, and perhaps here's some new things that we're adding to our to-do list. So that's an overview of the event schedule for 2018. As I said, there is the March 20th Employee Engagement Summit. This is going to be a live 1-hour webcast. And it's at 10 a.m. Central Time, and we're going to watch this in Downers Grove, and you can see some of the people who'll be featured in it. And you notice it doesn't say Yammer anywhere on here. It's a business focused and focused on employee engagement. And you can see the cast of characters, featuring the Executive Vice President of HR from Microsoft, and similar high-ranking people from Mondelez, KFC, TSB Bank, Sanofi Pasteur, and Accenture. So that should be very interesting. That's, not strictly technical, but if you're interested in Yammer, or if employee engagement is part of what you're using Office 365 for, this is something we encourage you to attend.
Yeah.
Moving to April 5th, as I said, the next Office 365 Adoption User Group meeting is April 5th. That's going to be downtown here at the ITA, the Illinois Technology Association offices in the Lyric Opera building, and our featured speaker is Jeff Abels, and he's going to talk about creating a people-centric digital workplace. And again, Office 365 is core to that. So there's the semi-short link to the Meetup site, and please register for those events. Also, a little preview. Where in June we're going to have Caruana Getimu from Microsoft talking to the Office 365 Adoption User Group about adoption of Teams.
Cool.
The next big announcement is something that was just announced to through the Office 365 Admin Message Center. Hub sites are coming. This is really architecturally huge for anyone building anything, any kind of portal or intranet site or departmental site in Office 365 and SharePoint Online. Hub sites are these sites that let you aggregate other sites. And so if you've noticed that the two kinds that when you're creating sites in SharePoint Online, the two sites that Microsoft is advocating right now, it's the team site, which creates an Office 365 group, and is really that mega package of all sorts of productivity and collaboration tools, and the communication site, which is really your new publishing kind of site. And the piece that was lacking, and I should point out first that both of those sites are created as sites in roots of their own site collections. And Microsoft is moving away from subsites. Architecturally, they really don't want people doing subsites anymore. And so to address the need to have hierarchies of sites, or this sort of a hub of sites, they created the hub site. And a hub site is going to let you connect sites together, not structurally, but by metadata. So you can say that that a site is part of a particular hub site. You get to choose which hubs it belongs to, and then you can change that. One of the problems with subsites in a site collection was if you needed to move a subsite to a different site collection, you had to either use a complicated PowerShell script or a third-party tool. It was a pain in the in the butt. And so here, if you're create a departmental site and you're bringing, say, the tax communication site and the human resources communication site and the accounting communication site together in a hub site, and then things get reorganized and you move one of those around to a different hub site, it's super easy. So the hub site will let you reorganize your portals in a super easy way, just by you changing the connection between a site and the hub it's associated to.
So there's no actual move in this case. A hub
Right.
site connection to one of its satellite sites is nothing more than a link, so that when you're looking at one of your satellite sites,
it's just a setting where you pick from a drop-down menu which hub a site is connected to. A hub can only be connected to one site at a time. A site can only be connected to one hub at a time. Hubs are admin created. When they initially announced them as a concept at Ignite last year, they thought, well, maybe we'll let anyone create them. But as they went through their development process, they decided that these should be, because they support communication sites, these should be centrally managed by the admins and not created by anyone. So they are admin created, and we'll see that new option show up in Office 365 Central Administration sometime between the end of this month and May. And when you create a hub site, all the sites that are joined to it get shared navigation. So you really can create these portal, whether it's a corporate intranet or departmental portal, these shared navigation portal experiences. So here's a look of here's one of the pictures from the blog post, and so you can see your standard modern site, a communication site, or team site has your new modern web parts. But if you look across at the very top, you've got this shared navigation, shared global navigation. And so Work at Contoso is the hub, and then it's bringing together whatever sites you've chosen. Perhaps that news is a site, the benefits portal, the charitable giving portal, the new hire portal. So it's bringing all of those together.
very cool.
So that's hubs, and I mean that's really a big deal architecturally, because before, when we created hierarchies and wanted to do roll-ups and that kind of thing, it was subsites, and Microsoft's moved away from subsites, and so this is the new way to do that. Don't know if we have time to open that for discussion, Dahl. I'm curious what people think.
Certainly for those of us that have been doing migrations for customers, the idea of breaking any kind of a nested hierarchical relationship between sites and subsites always has a lot of interest, a lot of attractiveness to me. I wonder if if you're already in a nested site hierarchy, how you go about breaking out of that to try to create this hub-based site hierarchy. Are you taking your subsites and actually turning them into site collections and then pointing them at a particular hub?
That would be my guess as to the recommended approach, yes. And so you've got third-party tools like ShareGate that will let you convert or upgrade or whatever you want to call it, a subsite to a site collection, and then yes, then that can be joined to a hub. And yes, this is SharePoint Online only. Will hub sites eventually accrue back to SharePoint on-premise in some cumulative update to SharePoint 2019? Probably. I mean, unless there's dependencies on online-only infrastructure, if it's possible, then there's a good chance it would end up in one of the cumulative updates for SharePoint 2019.
I see a couple of questions coming in. The first one was answered, that hub sites are SP Online only right now, and that seems to be the case.
Yes.
Looks like it's been answered. All right, yeah, and in the interest of time, Mike, thanks very much. Can you hand off either to me or hand off directly to Ralph Rivas?
Yes, let's see. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Have to hand off to me. This is Ralph.
Make another attendee here. Okay.
You got.
I think I can hand off now.
I think I've got it. I think I just handed.
Okay.
Okay. So I was going to have you take a look at it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me go do that. I'm changing the presenter back to me.
Okay.
Showing my screen for everybody.
Right. So we'll save time having to hand over again. There we go. All right. So again, my PowerPoint-less presentation.
Continue.
Look, Mom, no PowerPoint. Look, Mom, no teeth. Okay, fall down. All right. So really quick. Essentially, we're just going to cover some of the SPFX updates from the last time. If you were here the last time, there was essentially this same file that we showed. It was the February version of this update. Now, it seems that now Microsoft is on a, let's just say you're on a roll. They're going to put one of these out every month, and they're going to do it in this exact form. So if you go to dev.office.com, go to the blogs, give yourself some sort of link in there or alert or however you'd like to do it. Just once a month, go ahead and take a look and see what the latest blog update is. Now, the only thing about these, of course, is they go into extreme detail, and they go into everything like statistics and everything else that's going on. And if there's a major announcement, it sort of gets buried in to all the bits that are over here. So that's where our talk over here will essentially bust through that and tell you what the biggest things here. As far as March goes, and I hear someone has still got their microphone still on, so we can hear you eating. Yum yum. I'm looking for lunch too. All right. So I got some major things that are in here. Basically, the framework 1.4.1. A huge change going forward, mainly because besides the bug fixes, and remember that node problem that I've talked about before, where suddenly the version of node wasn't happy, you had to do all kinds of stuff to make it work. That was a big fix, and that's actually very, very huge, because essentially it meant that all your programs literally just stopped working unless you did this one silly environment change, and that shouldn't have been the case. That's gone. Even bigger though is Office Graph. There's been a change in the way Office Graph works, just say the underlying technology that connects to what's available in Graph. Graph itself is far improved. What can you do with Graph? That's a subject that can literally take quite a few hours just to talk about. But let's think of it this way. Everything about you is online somewhere, right? Yeah. Everything. You're like if you have Office, and if you have Office 365 because you have your Excel subscription, your Word subscription, however, everything about you is up there somewhere. If I wanted to grab that information from the cloud, Graph is the way to do it. If I want to make any decision about anything that's on that basically repository of information, and you could connect to other things and bring it into Graph, you're bringing it in. Now, the concept of Graph is it's like a database, right? And unlike a database where you have relational, you select star from a table and you're getting things that are related in some way. Graph essentially is everything is in a big blob, in a big bubble that says, okay, all of these are sort of related, but they're part of whatever it is that you're interested in. So yeah, Graph is like a loose database.
You can reach them. Yeah.
Right. So that's the concept of Graph right now. So it's very big. Maybe we in the future we can go into some detail. If you guys are looking for it, we can perhaps do a demonstration of using code to look at Graph, or using a web part to look at Graph, or just looking. It's just basically seeing how Graph works in the product itself. You know, that's going to be big. So yeah, that's the big thing.
If you remember, Ralph, last year we did a demo just using the REST API into Graph and in a browser to go and query it. It may be a revisit of that. But for those of you who are just new to this topic of the Microsoft Graph, it's a crazy word. It's useful only to the Uber developers. They may as well have called it what it is. It's a unified web service that you can query to get anything that, if it's stored in any manner, way, shape, or form up in Office 365, you can use this unified web service to query it inside your applications, inside your websites, however you want to do with it. And it may be time for us to revisit that next session.
All right. So that just to say, development-wise, how to get to it is not the same as the traditional ways of developers getting at databases, for example. But suffice to say that the fact that that's now available, essentially, it also means that a lot of things that we weren't able to do before, where we needed to pass authentication information, I think maybe that's the biggest piece over here. Before, you'd have to do all this code just to basically pass authentication. So imagine I want to connect to a service here and a service there. I would literally have to wrap around all this crazy code and maybe certificates and everything all around. If they have essentially consolidated that and made it very humongously easy to do. All right, and that we can go into detail at some other time, but that's a big one. All right, it does make a change, and of course, it's a breaking change, because here's what I discovered. If you attempt to update any of your older projects older than 1.4.0, you will not be able to do it that cleanly. I found out there is no clean way to go from anything that was created before 1.4.0. I found that out from the folks themselves. In fact, the next topic, essentially, of the big changes is the fact that they're talking about bringing in other folks from the outside, not just the Microsoft folks, into this team, into the patterns and practices team. We're talking like Andrew Connell, the folks from Rencore and everything else. They're actually going to be part of the team that's going to be studying a lot of these things that are going on, making decisions on what happens next and everything else. So they're actually bringing in the community to be part of it. And technically speaking, it's the folks that are participating that are being invited. So that leads me to my other part. There's this concept, there's another new thing that they came out with, which if you went to this link over here, PNP March 2018 update, down below they talk about the Office CLI. The Office CLI is a thing to itself. The Office CLI is like, if you were used to using PowerShell, now imagine that you had ability to do what the PowerShell stuff could do, but you could do it in any platform, in any way, shape, or form. You do it essentially from a command line interface, no matter what, and you can do basically the same things. But you do it in a different kind of scripty type code as opposed to PowerShelly. If you're used to PowerShell, then this doesn't matter. But if you wanted to do things web-wise or wanted to do things in the so-called open source way, the CLI essentially is the way to go for that one. There we go, the Office CLI. There it is. Okay. So that was released even though it was released in November of 2017, this is like the real GA. It's out there for everyone to use, and it's basically fully functional now. It can really be used. Andrew Connell and those folks like that are behind putting this together, but this is essentially what brought in that team. So that comes into the next part with the community. The concept is if you go to the GitHub, if instead of like say putting up an issue, I have an issue, something is broken, go fix it for me. How about this? You go over there, make a pull request, or have your people bring in what you want, fix it. You can keep it to yourself, or better yet, push it back. Microsoft sees you fix it, they approve it, they push it through. Everyone shares, everyone sees it. Microsoft will recognize you. You will be in their nice list of people who have supported us. And believe it or not, they actually kindly to the community involvement. This is really, really where things are going with Microsoft. Where
Ralph, can I interject for a moment?
Sure.
And this is true for documentation too. So
yes.
if you find SharePoint Online documentation that is missing details, for example, there was some SharePoint Online command that I was looking at the other day where basically none of the parameters were explained or weren't explained properly, and the documentation was on docs.microsoft.com. That site is tied to a GitHub repository, and so I can go log into GitHub, go to the repository, log an issue with that, and if I want, fork the documentation source code, make the changes if I happen to know what it should be, and do a pull request so that that we can improve the documentation too. So that same thing that you said about code contributions, documentation contributions, they can do that way too.
And they also recognize that as well. They make it a point to recognize it. Now, here's the thing. This really means that the community has a lot more power. Essentially, the only reason why it doesn't seem to be a Wild West is because everyone's being nice at the moment. So the question is, what happens when everyone really goes crazy? What if, like, those crazy folks from that crazy company that's somewhere in the East decides to come in and start changing things like they used to do to Wikipedia, adding those crazy entries and everything else? How does that get controlled? Well, it is Git. It is a source control. They can control it. It's not going to get out of hand. It's not going to go crazy. However,
so they'll be able to control anybody trolling and doing stuff.
That's right. You can't just troll, can't just stick in nasty code or try to put in a Trojan. Maybe because that's what a lot of people are not going online and not using stuff, mainly because they're afraid. They're like, where's the security? Oh my gosh, there's no security. Anyone can do a pull request and go ahead and toss in nasty code and then push it up. And then next thing you know, that my stuff's going to break or I'll have a breach. That's the whole point. It's on source control, including the documentation. So you can't even go in there and say, Mark is a ninny in the control and then pull request and he's in there. It's like, oh my gosh, look, and the Easter egg in small print. No, that's not going to happen. Again, pull request. How does source control work? You ever see source control? It shows you compare. Here's what it was. Here's what it looks like. Here are the changes. Do you approve? Do you comment? What do you want to do? Everyone, those people actually get to see it. So here's what I'm saying. Community is good. You can go crazy, but be assured that at least the tools are such that there is quality control. There is governance that can happen. It's just built in.
Did you say governance? What a great segue into the...
In fact, that's where I end right there. That's my rant on the community. My sharing is caring, as they say. So, and I pass it on. Sharing is caring, but as they say, you need to have governance.
Ralph, can you take that? I'm going to take this one more time. I'm going to copy this URL and paste it into the chat for everybody else to
yes,
add
please.
to their browsers, because there are some great things on there, including the new command line interface. Everybody, this is the wave of the future. Every technology out there is starting to go backwards. I want to say backwards, but it's to a more primitive, simpler to use command line interface that ends up giving you more flexibility. They're spending less and less time on a UI UX, more and more time on giving people the power that they need. So this is not a step in the wrong direction. This is a step the whole rest of the planet's been following in terms of providing functionality out to the users. And as Ralph mentioned, engaging people actively, maybe for the very first time in Microsoft's history, actively engaging and saying we're all part of this new hybrid open source proprietary environment. That this kind of sharing, this kind of involvement, this kind of engagement doesn't have to be the exclusive domain of open source license-free technologies. Microsoft can leverage it too. And just imagine the kind of evolution SharePoint could go through if everybody's contributing like that. Fantastic. Ralph, I'm going to slide this off to the side. I'm going to take over the screen and we're going to go crazy talking about the very next topic.
All right, not so crazy, I hope.
No, but it's room for all kinds of, here we go. Last month's member question, I've got a little note here that might be, require some, our managers, Dina and Edie, are about to unmute people in case you want to get vocal. So if you're eating, try to eat quietly. We are opening up the mics. And last month's member question was how to govern SharePoint. The big warning here is every veteran SME, even new people, can and will have conflicting viewpoints on this topic. It really, in my own experience, it depends on one key point. What's that? How to govern SharePoint? Here's my answer. It depends on what your organization actually thinks SharePoint is, and what your organizations are doing with SharePoint. That it's a very different beast than a lot of other technologies because it has so many facets. What do I mean? More truths. No single governance model actually works on all of the uses of SharePoint. If we take a step back and we look at some of the key primary uses of SharePoint, they use it for collaborating. Someone's breathing very heavily into the mic. Just ratchet it back a little bit, but leave the mic open.
Same process, we drag a file in there for trial.
Yeah, people that are on the call, be careful that your microphone is open, please. There's major uses of SharePoint. One is collaboration. The second one is content management. The third one is applications. The truth is governing each use of SharePoint using practices that fit that particular use. It's not the same thing across all of them. Here, we're going to start opening up and looking at some tips, some tricks, some do's, some don'ts. Here are the ones that I'm going to share with you based on.
What is actually happening is that if you add him up in here, because it should have like a global, I'm not sure why it doesn't show up.
Joe, I'm going to have you muted because I'm not sure if you're talking to the group or if you're talking somewhere else. Some of the tips: govern each use of SharePoint that fits that use. You're going to see that on the next 3 slides. In the world of collaboration, for example, conference rooms and workrooms in a company headquarters, the best advice I can give you is avoid constraining the collaboration that you're actually trying to nurture. Observe, for example, how little actual constraining occurs with your email systems and your file servers. Have you ever tried to send an email that you regretted with inflammatory marks and things like this in it? Yes, you actually were able to send it. There were no constraints stopping you. Did you ever inadvertently put the wrong file up on the file server? Yes, there was no constraint stopping you from putting some file up there that had to do with the company softball league or something like this, or a kid's picture from primary school. There's no real constraining in those areas. Why is everybody always trying to over-constrain SharePoint? I've never understood that in 18 years. Constrain instead only via SharePoint quotas. What you really need to look for, what's worked very well for organizations that build hundreds of thousands of SharePoint site collections every year, is to police. You set very few policies out there, you establish some base ground rules in the world of collaboration, and then you police. But you don't out and out stop people. Policing is always superior to constraining. You can police via SharePoint quotas and permissions. You can police via PowerShell scripts, what I call rules agents. This has worked at companies like Grant Thornton, companies like OfficeMax, companies like other ones in the Oak Brook area very nicely. You can create PowerShell scripts that very regularly will go and scan at night. They will scan and try to look for different rules being infracted inside your SharePoint environment. Files that are too large, particular files that you didn't want inside the system, excessive numbers of nested websites, even images that contain a certain kind of pixels that represent like human skin or something that you might not want inside your organization. You can detect these with PowerShell scripts, and the PowerShell scripts can actually record those infractions either back to a SharePoint list in a governance website or even to the event viewers on servers so that people can get pinged via pagers. All of this is possible inside SharePoint. What do you do with those infractions that you're policing? You can go and judge those via some kind of an individual administrator, or you can set up a governance committee. They meet every single Wednesday, and the first thing on the order of the day is to go and look and see what infractions are out there. And you might decide that the infraction is just requires educating. So someone's going to volunteer to reach out to Bob and say, hey, Bob, you're putting up images that we really don't want to see inside the corporate portal. So Bob takes them off. We didn't stop him. We just guided him. What's the real world analogy? Driving rules and regulations. We know we're not supposed to drive on the sidewalk, but there are no walls that keep us from doing so. We're given rules and regulations. We're expected to follow them, and we have police that are monitoring for when we break the rules, but nobody is installing walls so that you stay on the road. That's the best real world analogy I can give you. You're not trying to constrain that collaboration. Let's move on. Content management. If you're using SharePoint for content management, you're going to use governance that fits that particular use. Again, observe how little actual constraining occurs in email and file servers. We're going to do a little more than that in content management. We're going to constrain via quotas, permissions, upload settings. We're also going to constrain and guide by established taxonomies and security groups so that people know how to tag, how to structure. The analogy here at the bottom is a public library. There are rules, they're fair and they're sensible, and everything is more organized than in a collaborative environment. We're going to constrain via required fields on uploaded and edited documents. Hey, it's a library. You got to fill out a little library card when you're uploading a brand new document into the library. Again, policing is always superior over constraining. You're going to look at permissions, quotas, rules agents, and you're going to use those to try to monitor your SharePoint environment. So people use it actively. They don't feel hindered. The minute they feel hindered, they're going somewhere else. They're going back to email, and they're going back to file servers, or they're going back to just handing each other documents. We don't want that. It's not going to help the company out. Next application, next use of SharePoint, application development. An example, power tools inside the company equipment room. You have to be a little more careful here. First and foremost, the biggest tip is even embrace the existence that you have a black ops IT, that you have power users, that you have rogue IT out there trying to use SharePoint to build solutions that they wouldn't have been able to do, say, using Excel, which is the #1 favorite rogue IT tool for solutions. For applications, education is superior to constraining. Embrace the masses. Embrace the horde, the black ops, the rogue IT. Educate them. They want to know how to make good solutions. They're not out there to cause problems. They're out there to get their work done. Leverage that. Education is also superior to policing. You want to constrain via a code repository, via security groups, who can edit what, so people don't inadvertently butcher an application that's been put out there that's got client-side code in it like JavaScript, Angular, JS, etc. Again, policing is always superior to constraining. You want to monitor the performance of the SharePoint farm. Let that be an indicator whether or not somebody's running an application that's run amok or is causing some kind of problems. But try not to actually stop it from happening. You're just trying to pounce on it the moment it does happen so you can steer and guide it. Again, policing via PowerShell scripts, regularly scanning the area, looking for things that qualify as applications so that if they didn't contact you for help, if they didn't contact you for guidance, you're still able to detect it. You're able to proactively go in there and steer it. What's the real world analogy? Home Depot. You can walk into a, yeah.
I just want to add in here that in Office 365, in the Security and Compliance Center, you can also set up alerts that can watch for certain events, such as a new team being created, a new site collection being created, and you can have it send someone those alerts, and so that can help with your policing, and those are simpler to set up than, say, PowerShell scripts, but it also can help you identify opportunities for education as well. So when you see a new site collection being created or was created, you see who the user is. We use that as part of our user adoption things where we reach out to them and say, hey, we saw you created this. Can we help you with it?
Fantastic suggestion, Mike. And depending on what version of SharePoint you're running, what version and what platform in the cloud or on premise, these are fantastic suggestions. The key point underneath here, guys, don't constrain the crap out of SharePoint. Nobody's going to use it. Instead, open it up as much as it makes sense to do so. Use the ability to police and monitor. See them as opportunities to engage the users that are trying to solve business problems. Why? Let's look at the next slide and we'll see the big reason why. Historically, the developers that we see in this little green gold triangle in the top of this entire corporate population are always wildly outnumbered by the users themselves. The only way you can come up with any kind of a ratio between the developing of the solution and the users themselves that is satisfactory to the users is by trying to engage those power users in your organization. Give them the ability to solve their problems, but monitor and engage them at the earliest possible opportunity, whether they're collaborating, whether they're doing content management, whether they're actually developing applications that solve business problems. Engage them, educate them, and you will find out that not only will you have fewer problems in your SharePoint farm, but you will see the productivity soar in the SharePoint farm. People don't willingly go out and break stuff They don't run, they're not nihilists running amok trying to actually, you know, catastrophically fail the SharePoint farm. They're trying to get work done. Help them out. Use the tools that are available to do that without overly constraining them. We're going to dive into a couple of absolute must-haves that I'm sure most people are going to agree with when you're standing up a brand new SharePoint farm. A must-have, bulletproof backup mechanisms. You need to be able to recover in the event that something happens, like recover an individual server. Also, a backup mechanism implies high availability, multiple web application servers. It's not really about governance, but it's about having a site that people feel safe and feel confident using. You also want to have a bulletproof content recovery. Make sure your recycling bins all work at the site level, at the site collection level. And test them on a regular basis, because once people lose something, it doesn't matter how well you set the governance up, nobody's going to want to use it. Another bulletproof one, disaster recovery. You have to have a business continuity plan that if something goes down, how are you going to get the entire farm back up? Are you failing over to a particular location? Do you have a hot server or a warm server that can be turned into SharePoint? Did you decide that it merits going up into the cloud and suddenly DR no longer becomes really a problem for you? A couple other must-haves, simple navigation. It's got to mimic the purpose-centric file server structure. Why? Because most people that are moving from collaboration have literally spent decades using email and file servers. That's where they're at. There is no debating or negotiating it. They're willing to take a little step up. You have to make that step up as easy as possible. They're used to going into Windows Explorer, navigating through some folders. Give them something as simple. Give them something with the same naming convention. Mike hit it on the head when you're leveraging Office 365 and the hub sites, so that if you need to adjust that navigation, it's as easy as changing a link and you're rewiring up the way that all your websites are all tied together. Also, keep the websites and the templates simple. The idea is that they're supposed to mimic conference rooms. That was the vision 18 years ago, was that you were doing collaboration by using a website that removes the need for people to be geographically in the same location. It's supposed to mimic that. Don't let people go crazy. Give them the team site, enhance the team sites. Here at MTech, we've got team sites for all of our projects that have 15 templates, 15 list templates already built inside our team site. And it's the 15 most common things anybody would ever want to try to track. Goals, deliverables, questions, issues, risks, changes and defects, tasks, documents, etc. And it's almost exhaustive. Use that as a starting point, and you will realize that most of your collaboration is going to start to take on a very consistent, very manageable look and feel, because people are using those websites like war rooms, like conference rooms, to start collaborating, and suddenly the majority of your SharePoint activity is all staying inside the built-in functionality that SharePoint provides, and your governance goes down to an absolute minimum. In addition to must-haves, here's some should-haves. You should have MMD-based navigation. You're constantly improving it. It's managed metadata. What I mean by that is try to avoid creating highly nested hierarchies. They're ultimately going to require some kind of evolution anyways, and it's going to be painful. Also, should have different rules for different environments, different rules for collaboration, different rules for applications, different rules for content management. The analogies are SharePoint websites as conference rooms, SharePoint websites as libraries, SharePoint websites as applications. Since SharePoint websites can take on these different metaphors, you have to have different rules for each of them. And you already have an idea of how to manage applications. You already have an idea of how to manage a library, and you already have an idea on how you manage the physical conference rooms. So you've already got the rules in your head. You just need to start enforcing them in SharePoint. A couple more do's and don'ts, and then we're going to open it up for everybody to contribute. Do provide access to all conceivable collaboration participants, meaning internal and external. This is why I'm such a wild advocate of Office 365. The external user functionality knocked it out of the park for me when Microsoft said, hey, external users don't have a cost. You can invite vendors, invite business partners, invite your customers to collaborate with you inside your project sites, inside SharePoint, online, all tied into a hub type of activity. Absolutely fantastic. Do treat collaboration sites, your project team sites, as simply next-gen folders. Why? Because that's how the users are going to perceive them. If they can't do in those websites what they're used to doing on a file server in a folder, that's where you need to do work. Do create a base structure. Just a base, like you built the main parts of the building, and then get out of the way of the users. Let them start working in ways that make sense to them using the templates you provided. Focus on establishing a very simple set of rules. Communicate those at the beginning, even in the landing page of your SharePoint environment. Put the rules out, put the rules out, put the rules out. Put them off in the corner, put news and sports and things like that in the very front, but keep telling people what the rules are. Why? Because that's what we do out in the real world. The cops are always telling you the speed limit is 70, the speed limit is 30. Don't drive up on the sidewalk. Focus on establishing that simple set of rules. Adopt a single process or project site template and then use that. Don't kill yourself trying to come up with 20 or 30 different site templates. It's mind-numbing. Everybody will get the wrong one. When they pick the wrong one, they'll become frustrated. If they're frustrated, they no longer want to adopt SharePoint. Simple is better. Remember that your users are already collaborating. They're just using the wrong tools. They've been using email. They've been using folders. It's up to you to show them this tiny little path on how to get from folders into SharePoint sites as these next generation folders that they want to use. Show them how synchronization works. Show them educate, educate, educate is what's going to always do much better than governing, 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 governing. If you educate people, the governing is implied inside there. They will follow the rules. The last two, help users evolve from emails and folders. Mike had a fantastic suggestion. Leverage some of the monitoring capability that when people tentatively build a team site, it triggers some kind of a note that you know, and you can proactively reach out and say, hey, fantastic, you're using SharePoint, love to help you. How about a little 15-minute session where I learn what your needs are, you tell me, and I try to give you a little bit of guidance. You'll see that wildly embraced. People want to use these tools. They need a little guidance when they need it, not necessarily in training session after training session at a time that doesn't make sense to them. Lastly, encourage, even force collaboration via SharePoint. Start forcing people to not trade stuff via email. Start limiting how much space they actually have on the file servers and start saying the file servers serve a different purpose. And you will see the content eventually migrate over into SharePoint where you can more easily govern and contain it. Some more do's: demonstrate performing common activities via SharePoint, constantly educating. Show them how to communicate via SharePoint, how to share, how to task, how to track. Why? Because those are the 4 steps, if you recall, of a collaboration maturity model. You have to get them from one step to the next. Show them, demonstrate on a regular basis, or even can them into YouTube videos and show people. Make it super easy to find that information, and that education is going to help you avoid a lot of governance headaches later on. Some don'ts, and then we're in the home stretch. Govern by constraining, don't govern by constraining collaboration. It's a waste of time. If the minute you start constraining people, it's no longer a useful tool to them. You don't want somebody to get cut with their pocket knife, so you decide you're going to dull the blade. What are they going to look? They're going to say, my blade's dull. They're going to go get a sharp knife somewhere else. They're going to go and get a different tool. So constraining, to me, it always works against you, never works in your favor. Don't try to run a single set of rules across all of SharePoint. Rules for collaboration are different from content management, are different from applications. Understand which ones you want to try to set, communicate those, and do no more. Open for discussion. I think the mics are open. Whoever starts talking first will try to mute the rest of the people out. Jason, how about you? What are your thoughts?
This is Michael Blumenthal.
Go ahead.
I've got a couple of things I want to share here. One is that the way I approach governance is just enough governance. If you aren't in a regulated industry, if you don't have regulatory requirements that require you to do certain things, a light touch with governance is better. You can spend a lot of time doing governance and maintenance activities that have very little, if any, measurable business value. And as a IT pro who is responsible for an Office 365 tenant, I want to be doing things that show business value. The other part is that there are also third-party tools available for some of the governance considerations, such as site leases, which I think is a wonderful notion because it avoids zombie sites that people have created and then abandoned. There are tools out there from, for example, AppPoint which will ask people to renew their lease on their site for once a year or some whatever arbitrary time period you choose. And if the site owner doesn't renew the site will be archived or deleted. And so that's a great way to make sure that unused sites actually go away. And then when it comes to task management and team task management, we've been talking very heavily about SharePoint, but if you're working with Office 365, there's actually a bigger set of tools on the table, including team task management tools like Planner and communication tools like Teams, and Teams really can become a chat front end for SharePoint.
In fact, it's heading that way, isn't it? They're very chat-centric collaboration environment, if that's what works for your organization.
Or for your team. And you can have different teams within an organization can choose different subsets of tools.
All right, Mike, thanks for the input. I see a couple of other open microphones. Jason, did you have thoughts? Anthony, I see a couple others open.
Hey,
Dennis.
Mark. Yeah, Dennis had a
Yes.
question. Dennis actually submitted
Dennis,
it over the, what do you call it? Dennis, are you unmuted? I think you might be.
He's on the phone and unmuted, yeah. Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, my question relates specifically to security. The majority of my clients for the past few years have had questions and concerns related to auditing and implementing a viable security model, especially when we start to get into inheritance breaking and who has access to what, and then when people move in and out of teams or groups, it gets really hard for the people that are in charge of sensitive content to really get a handle on who has access to what. So I was wondering if there's ways to do that without having to purchase third-party tools or something on the roadmap, because it doesn't seem like if they're giving us more capabilities to leverage security, but I'm not really finding a high level of confidence in the ability to say to someone, yes, your content is secure and this is how I can show you that it is.
Well, certainly SharePoint's had audit capabilities for a very long time and a bulletproof security model. My intuition is telling me I need to know a little bit more about your particular applications to help me understand where they think that it's actually lacking. It sounds like you're describing a chain of custody, maybe related to documents that have legal relevance inside an organization, that you're trying to say who had access to. Certainly SharePoint and its audit log capabilities that are built in can actually tell you not only who had access to content, but who actually did access content, who performed a particular search, who actually looked at a particular file, even who printed it and downloaded it or uploaded it. These things are all built into SharePoint and are actively used by people. I'm not sure about when you described who had access to, if they didn't actually take action, but they could. Is that the problem that your customers are trying to solve? Like who could have accessed a document in a folder or in a library, in a record center, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, my thoughts is that like right now I feel like I have to buy a third-party tool to run some kind of an audit on my environment to be able to generate a report that shows, hey, this particular piece of content is accessible anonymously or accessible to someone outside the organization. Or so I guess kind of what I'm looking for is, maybe this is a future topic that I would be definitely interested in seeing, hearing, or participating in. But a lot of what I get right now is you want us to trust your environment. Okay, so we're going to put really sensitive content on there. How can you show me as the SharePoint guy that this content is secured?
I'm listening carefully and pondering the response to that. It does sound like this. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to take a crack at that and say that there are certainly the case for third-party tools is pretty strong there, in as much as, in my experience, a tool like ShareGate does make reporting on permissions, on what access is configured easier than what you get out of the box. And I'd say the security story in terms of audit trail and the ability to easily search the audit log is stronger in Office 365 than it is on-premise. And in terms of demonstrating this is sensitive. If you have this is sensitive content and you need to protect that, you can see, okay, this you can show, okay, this file, this is the permissions on this file. People in this group have read, people in this group have edit, people in this group have full control, and here we can see who those people are. Unless there's AD groups involved, then we have to look at in AD. But in Office 365, at least, you have the ability to also say to create data loss protection rules, saying, okay, if this content contains a social security number, if this content contains a credit card number, then do certain things. Don't let people download it, or apply rights management rules so people can't forward, can't email it, or can't forward it, or can't print it, or so forth. You can encrypt it so that only the people that you want to grant access to can open it. And that's through Azure Rights Management, and that'll work even once that file leaves SharePoint. Even if it gets emailed, you can rescind access to it through Rights Management. So there are ways. They're not necessarily simple, and so it certainly depends on your business requirements, and in some cases. There are third-party tools certainly should be evaluated at least.
Okay, and like I said, I would be thankful, or what if you guys have any links to either the blogs or articles, or implementations, best strategy guides, or things like that. I would certainly be grateful if you guys could either put that in the chat or pass it along or send it to me kind of after the fact. I'm kind of curious what other people are doing in terms of maintaining and securing their content.
And validating it. It sounds like what you really need is that validation that Michael hinted at with a product called ShareGate that does a pretty good job of showing the two-dimensional mappings that you have between security group, the individual users, the documents and the settings and the permissions. It's always a really tough to even visualize, much less report. You can look at it on a document by document basis, but when you're trying to get that larger comprehensive file plan that says, here's all the documents, here's all the people, and here's how all the individual permissions map to those documents, that becomes a very tough nut to try to crack in terms of the reporting of it, much less the confirming of it. And there are people that are taking stabs at that. Yeah, let's continue to work on that and let that be an ongoing topic for the next couple of months even. One thing that I wanted to...
I was just going to say, this is something that I'm working on with my current clients, so I'd be open to collaborating with you guys and possibly doing a presentation on this once we kind of put something cohesive together.
How big is your current client? Do they have a Microsoft account team?
Yeah, the last two clients I've been working on have tens of thousands of users, so on Office 365. So the challenge is when you walk in after this has been running for 2 years and they say, hey, we think we had security breach.
Yeah, okay.
And then your job is to do some sleuthing and to figure out, first, what is the model, and then who has access to what, and then who should no longer have access to certain content. So how do you roll all that stuff up without spending, tens of thousands of dollars on additional licensing? I guess is kind of what I'm looking for.
Right. I do see us working together over the next couple of weeks and coming back and presenting to the members of the users group what we're able to actually communicate. It sounds like there's certainly a level of confidentiality here, but once we scrub some of the lessons that we learn, it sounds like you'd be interested in co-presenting next week on what we find.
I would love the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I would encourage is partner with the Microsoft account team, because there are Microsoft resources, there are Microsoft technical solution professionals, and sales solution professionals who can help as well. So I mean, Microsoft wants to make sure that especially if it's Office 365, they want to make sure that you keep renewing your Office 365 licenses. They may see this as an opportunity to upsell you from one license to another. But yeah, it's I mean, they should be able to answer some of these questions about security best practices. If you've got that many seats, you've got Microsoft Fast Track benefits. Make sure you're using some of those, because that's also a great avenue to get some of the security issues resolved.
Okay.
You guys, we've our 1
Can
o'clock.
someone reach out to me after this to go through that?
Say that one more time. I interrupted. My apologies.
Oh no, I was going to say, is someone going to reach out to me to talk about a future presentation?
Yeah, Dennis, let's see. I can reach out to you via Meetup. Meetup obfuscates the actual email address. So I'm going to give you my email address so that you can reach out to me later, okay? That way it puts the ball in your court.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And I'm also going to suggest the techcommunity.microsoft.com website, that this is a great community forum. So if for questions of what are security best practices, or sharing experience, or asking people questions or advice on how to deal with some of these security concerns, tech community can be good for that.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Yeah. One thing I hope to address in today's session with all of these tips, tricks about governance was that I believe it was an attendee that came from last week. If you were one of the attendees that asked that question, let us know if this started to help answer some of your problems. Feel free to reach out to me. Everybody's got my email address. I think we're getting ready to close. I'll try to keep everybody else in the loop as well. Next session is April 18th. Enjoy your St. Patrick's Day this coming weekend. Look forward to seeing you in April and maybe at some of the other events. Fantastic session, everybody. Thanks for participating, and we'll see you next month, okay?
Thank you.
Yep. Bye, everybody.